how somebody's home smells, how a restaurant smells. When we smell something, it makes us feel first before our brain processes why it's making us feel that way. So there's a very practical way to use fragrance around creating cool spaces for yourself and other people. Just by having fragrance present, it is creating emotion.
Everyone deserves a home that brings them joy. Maybe you're more of a collector or an audiophile, or maybe you're more of an adventurer than a recluse. Everyone's home should be a reflection of their personality. So we wanted to speak to some of the most interesting and inspiring people we could find about how their personalities impact the homes that they live in today. Steve Soderholm is a perfumer, a drummer, and a co-founder of Ranger Station, a fragrance house known for its award-winning candles, colognes, and room sprays. He and his wife Jordan founded the brand in Nashville, but have recently opened their second location in the West Village of New York. The brand mixes rugged Americana with refined craft that connects smell and memory. What's up, Steve? Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Jeffrey. I appreciate it. That was a good intro. Can you just start introducing me to every event I go to and stuff? Yeah. Every family dinner when my family's like, so what is it that you do?
I'll come be the hype guy.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So I obviously want to talk about Ranger Station and everything that you guys are doing today, but I always think it's fun to kind of zoom back for a second and ask what your first home looked like. So what did it look like growing up?
Yeah, man. Growing up, I grew up in Minnesota. Yeah, I loved growing up there. I think there wasn't too much going on and creatively, so you had to try and seek that out. I always thought that there was something creative that I really wanted to do, and that's how I kind of ended up playing music, and drums were my first love. And my awesome mother, we convinced her that we would build a stage out in our basement while she was at work one day. And what that turned into, in her mind, she was like, oh yeah, you guys are going to set up a couple pallets or something like that. We had a semi-finished basement. But we recruited my neighbor who owned a construction company and ended up building out a whole wall-to-wall stage, diamond plate on the front, whole thing painted. So we had basically a full venue in the basement of my house growing up. And yeah, it just became the house that all my friends would come over to and hang out, and a lot of us were musicians, and we just ended up playing music together, started 14 different bands probably, and that was my life. And especially middle school, high school, that's where my joy was for sure.
Is there a scent that you remember from that childhood?
Oh yeah, so the first candle I ever made it's called Leather and Pine. It's still one of our best-selling candles today. And it's kind of my love letter to Minnesota, especially northern Minnesota though. So my grandparents, a lot of my life, lived across the street from me, and then they ended up moving about 30 miles from the Canadian border. And I spent a lot of winters and summers there, and it's just such a magical, amazing place, just surrounded by national forest, which makes it so magical. But yeah, I just spent a ton of my time growing up out there with my grandfather, out in the woods. We were wearing Red Wing boots and playing, working in the woods. So that's really what inspired that Leather and Pine candle, which we have a fine fragrance of it as well. But yeah, that was, I say it's the first candle I ever made. What I should say, it's the first candle I ever made that actually smelled good. I made some stuff that didn't smell good before that, that never saw the light of day, for good reason.
So was Leather and Pine the first Ranger Station product?
Yeah. So it was when the Ranger Station website launched. Next month will be 10 years. 10 years ago, the only thing you could buy on the website was the Leather and Pine candle. We set up a website that had one product, and that was it. And I think we sold 200 of them or something like that for the holiday season of 2015, and I thought that was the coolest thing that had ever happened. But yeah, it was just the one candle.
So what's the path from the one candle to maybe even your first brick and mortar in Nashville?
Yeah, for sure. So 2015 was a really interesting time for me because Ranger Station was birthed out of this time I had when I was at home when I wasn't touring. So music is what brought me to Nashville, and I was playing drums full time on tour. But what that means is, when I was gone on the road, it's go 24/7, and then you'd come home, and all of a sudden nothing's going on while you're at home. And I was really bad at that start and stop. So I always needed something else happening when I was at home. I got into woodworking for a little bit. I love working with my hands. And what ended up happening was, because I was always gone from home, anytime I was home, we'd invite everybody over to the house, and we'd bartend, we'd make cocktails for everybody. And so I was getting really into making cocktails and mixology, and we always made sure there was candles burning at the house, because there was just a part of that we knew created a cool space for people, right? So we were doing that, and I always say I was developing this expensive fragrance habit on a very limited drummer's budget, and a big part of that was just because I needed something to do when I was at home. So that was the birth of me actually making candles. It just started out as a fun side project, and about 5 years into touring full time, I got to the point where I'd absolutely loved the time I spent doing it, but knew that being gone all the time was not something I wanted to do forever. Like, Ranger Station had been started, like we had the website with just the one leather and pine candle. But yeah, I was like, all right, let's figure out what's next. Still not thinking it's going to be Ranger Station. Thinking, all right, I did the creative thing. I had fun. Like, this was great. Now it's time to, get responsible and get the normal day job, right? But nothing ever like really felt right. And I inevitably just started spending more and more time on Ranger Station. So it ended up becoming, it became a full-time and then more than full-time thing. And yeah, that was the first couple of years was just me, still just making the candles on my stovetop. And, I could make like 30 candles a day or something like that. Was like a full day of production for just me, doing everything start to finish by hand, which we still do. We still make all the candles by hand, but we're able to make more than just 30 a day now.
Hopefully.
But yeah. So fast forward to today, I think what really sets us apart is we manufacture everything and we perfume in-house. We learned early on that it was almost easier for us to just keep those things in-house, actually own the production, own the product development process, the perfuming aspect. So the first 5 years was really just, hey, let's figure out what this is, what we're doing, we're having fun with it. And then the last 5 years have been just really watching the brand grow in a really cool way.
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to ask you about perfuming and making, and obviously some tour stories.
Yes.
But maybe we can just back up a little bit. I'm just curious, what does the scent design process look like? What's the actual experimentation process?
So fragrance, first of all, is such an interesting thing because it's, in so many ways, it's intangible. So it's, in a lot of ways, it can be really hard to talk about, because you're like, how do you describe fragrances? You can use colors, you can use shapes, you can use actual things. Like, you can say rose, but rose means so many different things to different people, right? And so yeah, it's such an interesting thing to talk about, like fragrance and the creative process of it. But the best way I've found, and I think what really led me into fragrance in the first place a lot of ways, is that it's really not that different from music. And the way that I view developing a fragrance or writing a fragrance is the same way that I would view writing a song. With starting at the end, the purpose of a song is to tell a story, whether that's a personal story to the artist that's writing it, or fictional story, or a feeling or a specific place or something like that. That's all perfumery is, whether it's a candle, fine fragrance, room spray, hotel fragrance, right? It's all about, what is the story that we're telling with this fragrance? That's the most important piece of it. It could be leather and pine, where it's a very specific place, or it could be, like one of our best selling perfumes is called Jordan's Perfume, and I made it for my wife, Jordan. And again, just like music, perfumes are written with notes and chords. So the best way I can describe it is, imagine yourself sitting at an organ, because a perfumer's desk with all raw materials is called a perfumer's organ. And it's because you have all your perfume notes, right? And anywhere from all your sandalwood notes, amber notes, musk notes, geranium, like it's, I've got about 250 on mine, and I'm always adding more. and you use those actual notes to build chords. I'm not sure if you play piano or guitar or anything like that, but if you play a C note on the piano or a C chord, that's a 1, 3, and 5 of the C chord, right? It sounds very different. It has the same root note, but the chord is more complex. So I start with perfume notes, then I build perfume chords. So I could start with a sandalwood note and then bring in other sandalwood notes to build a sandalwood chord. And then you bring those chords together to create the actual perfume. And every perfume I kind of call everything perfume, but whether it's oil for a candle or a fine fragrance or anything else, it's all broken down into 3 different parts: top notes, middle notes, and bass notes, which again, so similar to music. It's, you can think of it as like when you're adjusting the EQ on your stereo of like treble, middle, and bass. Scent notes are essentially the same thing. Top notes are going to be those really bright, crispy notes, a lot of really light, fresh, green citrus notes. And then bass notes are going to be just, again, similar to the bass notes in a song. They're deep, they're more buried in the mix. But bass notes are my favorite because they're these really big molecules that have really low energy. So they're actually harder to smell at first, but because they have all that low energy, it's what makes a perfume last for a really, really long time. Yeah, and then it's just a lot of trial and error of just, once I know all the notes and chords that go into the song, then it enters the mixing phase, which, I think of it as, once everything is tracked on an album, you send it off to mix, and that's my time of figuring out, I've got all the materials there, I've got all the notes that I want in it, but then I got to figure out how much of each thing do I want in the actual mix, how much snare drum, how much kick, how much bass, guitar, all that stuff. But it's how much sandalwood, how much rose, how much iris, how much orris, all of those different things. And then it's a bunch of wear testing, just if it's a perfume, actually wearing it, seeing what other people think. And that's totally wherein you're putting your heart on your sleeve and exposing your soul to the world in a lot of ways. Because again, same with music, like some people are really going to like it and some people really aren't going to like it. So it's, and it's so personal. So you gotta put it out there and see what people actually think of it. Some people always ask if I miss playing music, and I do, but I don't miss it too much because I feel like I'm more creative now, almost more musical now than I was even when I was touring full time, because of just how similar perfumery and songwriting and music and perfume, just it all feels so similar to me.
Yeah, so cool. I read a little bit of that on your Substack, and I thought that comparison to between music and scent was fascinating.
The other thing I'll just add in there really quick is, I think I talked about this in that Substack too, but the human mind is so cool. And one of the ways that it's crazy is like, we still don't fully understand why certain things smell the way they do to us. And my favorite theory of why things smell the way they do is because of everything's in motion. So every molecule, every fragrance molecule, right? Like everything's made up of molecules. So when we're actually smelling something, one of the leading theories is that the frequency at which that molecule is vibrating is what makes it smell the way that it does to our brains. So it's, like same as like playing a a note on a guitar. The frequency is like what determines what you hear. The same could be true for the frequency that the molecule is vibrating at, is actually what our brain is interpreting as smell. It's wild. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, maybe a total side note. I have this book behind me that I've been reading called Your Brain on Art.
Yeah.
Because I'm halfway through and I'm curious now if they get into scent, because they're talking a lot about sound and how sound can actually have like medical impacts on, people with Alzheimer's and all these kind of things that were like capital A art or whatever, to actually be considered in a more scientific, at least worth studying is been really fascinating.
Yeah, it's wild. Even when I was in high school, I had to do like a science fair project thing. And our project was on how music affected heart rate. like different styles of music, like specifically to like then how did it like affect mood and stuff like that. Like obviously more upbeat, higher energy stuff, raised heart rates, whereas classical music and like chill jazz music like lowered your heart rate. And it's very cool like how that stuff how all our different senses can really affect our state of being and emotional health and all that stuff in a lot of ways.
Totally. I mean, a huge reason why I wanted to chat with you today is because, when we're designing architecture and interior design for people's homes, I feel like we're often thinking about 3 or 4 of the senses on a regular basis. And I feel like scent is often left to be one of the last ones. Maybe I'll throw it back to you. Like, can you just talk to me about how, scent in a space or maybe in a home specifically has the ability to like impact someone's real life?
100%. So a couple things here. First of all, I'm a fan of all of our senses. But what I think is you may have heard somebody say before, like our sense of smell is the strongest of our senses. I don't think it's necessarily that one is stronger than the other, but what makes our sense of smell really unique and different than all of our other senses is that how much our brain has to work is so much less than our other senses. Like when we see something, when we hear something, when we touch something, our brain has to go through a lot of effort and a lot of like synapses in order for us to process. And our sense of smell is almost the opposite of that. So our olfactory system is directly tied to our amygdala and hippocampus, right? Our limbic system. It's all about emotion and decision making and memories, right? And this is the reason that most people have had the phenomenon of you smell something and it makes you feel really nostalgic, but initially you don't know what that nostalgia is of, right? Like you smell something and you're like, oh, this reminds me of something, but I can't remember what it reminds me of. It's because of how our olfactory system works, where when we smell something, it makes us feel first before our brain processes why it's making us feel that way. So when it comes to how can you use fragrance in a practical way, like especially in a home, it's the first thing our mind recognizes when we walk into a space, whether we're conscious of it or not, is how it smells. And a lot of times we're not conscious of it. But what's cool about that is it sets the tone for the rest of your experience in that space, which I think is just absolutely incredible or could be terrible, right? If it smells really bad in a space, it could have the opposite effect. But so it creates the tone for the rest of your time in that space. And that could be like, think of first impressions when you first meet somebody, how they smell. Your brain is making note of that, even if you're not. How somebody's home smells, how a restaurant smells, your mind is immediately feeling something based on that. So there's a very practical way to use fragrance around creating cool spaces for yourself and other people, in that you can, just by having fragrance present, it is creating emotion. And then there's a whole field of study around how different scents evoke different emotions. A lot of citrus like lemon, bergamot, things like that are they boost energy and creativity. But sandalwood notes and amber notes, very like warm, creamy, woody notes, are very relaxing. And then the other thing is just that because of how our brain is wired and our olfactory system is wired to something we say at Ranger Station is we want to die with memories, not dreams. Just this, and the idea of that is that life is about, like, we don't get to take any of this stuff with us, but our memories, right? So we want to create a currency of memories where we're just building up more and more memories and great memories throughout our lives and experiences. And what makes fragrance so cool is that having fragrance as an aspect of an experience allows you to remember it better. Not only does it affect your experience in that moment, but the fragrance aspect allows you to tap into that memory more, and your memory of that experience is even stronger.
So with that idea of creating those memories through fragrance, are you champion of people having like a signature scent in their home or mixing it up for the occasion?
I think it's different for everybody. I read a lot about, like, 5 years ago everything was about signature scent. Now most things are about having like a fragrance wardrobe. My biggest thing with fragrance is it's so personal to people. So just find what works for you. Some people will really gravitate towards having a signature fragrance for their home or for themselves, where, I've got good friends that use Ranger Station products and they're like, hey, I always have the leather and pine candle burning in our house. Like, that is our home signature fragrance. But then there's other people that use different scents for different occasions, different times of year. They're going to do something different for a dinner party than they are for like a cocktail hour, or like a kid's party versus an adult party, like different things. They're going to use different fragrances based on what they're wanting to do with that time. Is it a high energy creative space? Is it in a studio where somebody's songwriting, or is it in a cocktail lounge?
It's so funny. We just had another one of these conversations for this series with a woman who is like sommelier of the year and a beverage director for some amazing New York City bars and restaurants. And one of the things we talked about is, and this might have just been a total side note of something that I think about way too often, but the idea of having very like powerful scented hand soap in a cocktail bar, where you're then going to be bringing that up and like changing the experience of the cocktail, which is designed to be for a certain scent, and like how those coordinate. And I think she kind of landed on the idea that, keeping that relatively neutral but pleasant, obviously.
Yeah, we do helps. Outside of Ranger Station, I do perfuming for quite a few like hospitality things, and that's always a thing of, especially with things like hotel lobbies that have restaurants in them. We always try to we want it so when you walk into the lobby, you smell the fragrance really strong, but then when you go into the restaurant, it's not there, because you don't want it competing with what's already happening in the restaurant.
Does that idea carry through maybe either in theory or in your own home? Are there certain spaces that you think might be powerful and then certain spaces should be subtle?
Yeah, I think I just wrote a thing on this for, I think, an article, but it's like, I always say, kind of like entryway. It's like, that's a fun place to do something really powerful and unique and crazy, right? Something that's a little bit more out of left field and fun, because it's the first thing people are going to notice when they come into your house. But they're also not going to stay there for a long time, right? So it's going to make this cool first impression that could be really creative and fun. So I love doing, especially because I'm always burn testing new stuff we're working on, and I love putting that in the entryway because I want to see people's reactions. I usually keep candles out of our kitchen if we're doing a dinner party or anything like that. And kitchen and dining room, I usually don't have anything there. The powder room is also a really fun place to do something really unique, again, because most people are probably going to use that space at some point while they're at your home, but they're not hanging out in the powder room. But then the living room is a great opportunity for something more subtle, and that is because people are going to be spending a lot of time there, right? If that's where you're just hanging out and having good conversation, and that's a good place where to use something more calm, and that could mean something different to each and every person, but that's usually how I do it.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's something I never thought of before.
Yeah.
Speaking of the kitchen and keeping maybe some scents out of there, are there, maybe just in your own home, are there foods or materials or anything that you're avoiding as somebody who's very sensitive?
No, I mean, because I just love fragrance, like I also just love the smell of cooking, and I also just love cooking too, because it's such a similar art form. I think you're just, you're bringing multiple stuff together to create something new. It's kind of the same as perfumery, but I love that. So there's usually not anything. I'm trying to think of like scents, like especially in cooking, that I don't like, and I can't really think of anything that I don't like. In perfumery, there's a lot of there's a lot of raw materials that are really unique and like don't smell good. I just created a fragrance with castoreum in it, which comes from beaver glands and smells very pheromone, kind of gross body odor, like by itself in concentration. But when you dilute it and you use it with a bunch of other stuff and kind of bury it, it creates this, like, it takes on this whole new character. And while it, like, by itself, it doesn't smell that good, like in the mix of something, a lot of times if a fragrance is described as sexy, like it's kind of these more dirty pheromone animalic notes that are almost reminiscent of just like body odor, but there's a natural attraction that people have to each other. I'm fascinated by stuff like that too, of it evokes emotion, even though it's made by itself, like you'd smell it and be like, this does not smell good.
I have to assume if you're messing with some things like that on a regular basis that you're maybe not mixing this stuff at home anymore.
No, yeah, I've got a perfume studio. It's actually in the back of our Nashville store. But I've got a whole like air purification system in there where it just like pulls anything out of the air. Because you also go nose blind to stuff really quickly. I can only perfume for, depending on what I'm perfuming, I can't really do it that long. A couple hours, and usually I have to stop just because it becomes harder and harder to smell stuff especially when you're perfuming and you're smelling really concentrated raw materials all the time.
Is there anything that you and Jordan are still doing at home, or have you been good at keeping your...
I'm in my home
life
office right now. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We always say we want Ranger Station to be an extension of our home, and the big reason of that is like we love having people over to the house, and I still make cocktails for people all the time when they come over, and we cook for people all the time. So, but definitely not making candles at home anymore.
Yeah, it sounds like hosting is a through line from building a stage in the basement to hosting now. Yeah.
I think it all goes back to the idea of creating experiences and memories for other people and for ourselves.
In the space that you're in now, is there something that you've had to intentionally, plan or design to make it a good space for hosting?
So we've been in our current home for just over a year now. So it's still pretty new to us, but we looked for a super long time to find the right space. Yeah, I think every time people come over, they're always like, this house is so cool. I haven't seen anything like it before. And I think that was like the thing we were really looking for. Jordan always joked, because I was like, babe, I really want something that's got character and personality. And she was like, oh no, like thinking that meant it was going to be kind of this, like thing that just needed way too much work. But I think what we got, like, it just has so much personality. It's a really cool space.
Have you been able to bring those woodworking chops out, or are you too busy parenting and running a business?
Too busy with the perfume and the kids. Yeah. We're about to have baby number 3 in August too. So
Wow.
Yeah.
What about music? Do you have a space in the house to either play or a good listening room or something?
Yeah. Here. Can I move my...
Sure.
You might be able to see my office a little bit, but there's my drum kit. So this is our office downstairs.
It's beautiful.
But yeah, so
good light in the basement.
I know, it's great. Yeah, we got tons of good natural light in the neighborhood. Oh, also, it's like there's turkeys that walk by our windows every day. There's a deer that keeps eating all of our tomatoes. But yeah, so I still get to play music quite a bit for fun, which is good.
Can you tell me more about how the collaborations between Ranger Station and some of the musicians and bands you're working with came about?
Yes, I think we do collaborations very differently in that we want them to be true collaborations. It's not just us being like, hey, can we pay you guys some money to put your name on something, right? It's we actually sit down with these people and figure out what is the story that we're telling. And they all happen in very different ways. Like the Noah Kahn thing was really cool because his team reached out to us. It was right before his Stick Season album came out, and they wanted to do this fragrance around, Stick Season is the fall in Vermont, and it was written during the pandemic, and like all, like it had this very real story that we really connected with. So that was a really fun one, because it was like, hey, let's create a fragrance that tells that story. What does the stick season in Vermont smell like? The team actually comes in, we smell stuff together, we talk about what we want this to be. I think the users of it relate to it more. I know we relate to it more, so I hope the people using it relate to it more as well, just because it feels more real, and it's telling, the story behind the product is a real story, not a contrived story.
To that same question, like the brand feels very defined, at least to me. It feels like there is a lot of that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe that like rustic Americana-ness to it.
Yeah.
But
We use the word Americana all the time. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I can feel that there's a, Minnesota story behind the pines and a Vermont story behind the Noah Kahn collaboration, and it feels really like connected to the earth. So I'm just curious if that's you and Jordan, like if that's something that you personally connect with, or that was a decision when you were kind of designing the brand as something maybe it's separate from you personally.
It's kind of all of the above. So the name Ranger Station comes from when I was still playing music full time, fresh out of college. I was living in a house in Nashville that used to be an old ranger station. But talk about character, there's animals living under that house, but it was so cool because we were living in the city, but we were surrounded by trees with a freshwater creek in our backyard. It felt like we were living in the woods, and felt like home to me, coming from Minnesota, and especially that time spent in northern Minnesota. Felt very familiar. But it was also a really cool place where people just came together. It was always, we'd come home and people that didn't live there were in the backyard having a bonfire, and it was a gathering place for people, and it had the name The Ranger Station. So that name kind of always stuck. And then when it came to the actual like perfuming and fragrance creation piece of it, everything, like, especially when I was first starting out, everything was very nature inspired, which meant in the beginning to me meant this very like woodsy, piney, camping, hiking, those type things. So that definitely lent to the brand a lot. When I think of American craftsmanship and Americana and what American craftsmanship has done really, really well, it's this idea of making something that's really high quality, but not luxury. Recently, I've started saying we're like the Ford Bronco of fragrance in a world of like Ferraris. I know a lot about the raw materials of fragrance, and there's no reason a bottle needs to be $500. There's nothing about the juice that's going into that bottle that should make it that much money. So what I think we do a really good job of, and what we really lean into with that American spirit, is that we want to create something that is super high quality, but at a actual reasonable price point where you're purchasing, what you're spending on it is you're paying for the quality, not for the name.
Is that something that you're bringing into your own home as well? Like that kind of connection to nature? Maybe when you were looking for the new space, was that an important consideration for you?
We're slowly pulling it all together, but all the pieces that we have in our home, we want to have some sort of story too, like even this piece, this art behind me is something that like my buddy painted, Les Priest, and it's like, this is something like of his grandfather's. Like when we build, let us think that we build forever. Like it's like he has a story behind this piece that he made. But I think that is more than like bringing nature inspired pieces in. I think it's story inspired pieces. I want most of the things that we have in our space to have a story behind it.
It's literally the last question I've written for you is if there are objects in your home that tell a story.
Yes.
That's what kind of stuff we're thinking about all the time.
I even love pieces where it's like, oh, this obviously has a story, but we have no idea what that story is. Like we love to go antiquing and find like really cool art pieces. There's something mystical about that, of like, what's, if this painting could talk, where has it been? What would it tell us? Like all that kind of stuff, I think is really cool and important. And then just attaching our own memories to items as well, I think is is important to us.
Well, awesome, man. I know I've said this to you a few times, but it was very exciting to see Ranger Station popping up in New York, and really interested to hear your thoughts on how scent and the stuff that you guys are creating and thinking about all the time connect to people's homes on a daily basis. So I think it'll definitely be something that, people that are listening to this are connecting with. So thanks for chatting.
Yeah, of course, Jeffrey. I really, really appreciate it. This was super fun.
As we discuss in these conversations, we really believe that the best home designs are the ones that are the most personal. So if you're looking to pair your personality, your passions, and your lifestyle with home design amenities for a future project, jump over to our website or check out our card game, Personal Space.